Can everybody hear me? Perfect. I'm sorry I'm between you in drink and beer and food or whatever. We are the last session of the day. We've got 637 slides. We shouldn't take long. Okay, we're here really today to talk about VPN replacement with ZTNA. I will ask some questions as I go through, but first I'm going to introduce myself. Jugraj can introduce himself, and then we'll get into what we're talking about. So my name is Jay Tilson. I'm Field CTO and Distinguished Technologist for HP Aruba Networking. I look after our security portfolio. Most of my life I spent sitting in chairs like yourselves today, so I still get a little bit nervous stood up here. I was a customer for 25 plus years. My first ever job was for a company called ID Software, if anybody remembers them. My mum convinced me that playing games for a living was never going to make any money. I never really forgave her for that. I went to work in manufacturing. I did that for about 12 years for a Japanese manufacturing company. I then went to work in Formula One for a number of seasons for the company that has the car upstairs. And then I went back into UK manufacturing, well, global manufacturing, but for a UK company. And then I found what is now referred to as Zero Trust, and it kind of changed my life. I bought from one of the original ZTNA vendors, one of those kind of early adopters. And then I found a small company called Access Security. I worked for them for about 3 years, 1 year as a consultant and 2 years as an employee, and then we were acquired by HP Aruba Networking. So I'm now on the dark side in a vendor. I apologize for that. I'm going to talk about specific use cases today. This is quite a high-level discussion. We're not going to get into all the weeds. If you want a demo, you can come upstairs. But we also have a deep dive session tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the room opposite if you're interested. Okay? Over to you, Jugraj.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I'm going to keep it nice and short. I'm not that excited kind of background, but my name is Jugraj. I am a pre-sale consultant. I'm working in HP Aruba now for last 1 year. My background, I was always on the vendor side, guys. I always work at vendors like, I worked at Brocade, F5, Citrix. The last one, just before joining HP Aruba, I was working at Netscope. All my life, as I said, is more from networking, security, application delivery, and now I'm working as a more a specialist on a cloud-delivered security. And today we're going to talk about ZTNA in this session. If you guys are more interested, want to really see it, I am on booth number 510 upstairs. Please come see me. I'm going to be there, not tonight. I'm going to be drinking beers, but tomorrow morning I will be there from 9 o'clock. Please come, and we can also go more into details about our SSC architecture. But in this session is focus on the business use cases of why we need to replace VPNs with ZTNA. Yeah.
I'm not going to read all of this. Forward-thinking statements. Obviously, if you've attended any of the other events today, you can take a photo if you really want to study it. We may mention some forward-thinking statements, okay? And this is what we're going to go through. We're going to go through changing world, the evolution of access architectures, shifting landscape. Jugraj is then going to cover really ZTNA orientation. What is it? What does it mean? Why is it important? And then we're going to go through some specific use cases. The changing world. It wasn't that long ago, or it doesn't feel that long ago, that everybody's data was kind of stored in that file server under the finance person's desk, okay? But the cloud came along, and we started to move towards the cloud. The pandemic came along, and the shift to cloud was even greater. And then there's this element of IoT and OT, where we've got devices connected everywhere, at home, cookers, microwaves, fridges, and everything's connected. And all of the stuff within manufacturing environments, and the Formula One car upstairs has got hundreds of IoT and all of those kind of things connected. So it's quite important that this world's changed from the way it was.
Yeah, and if you look at the application side of things, as I said, I was working for application delivery controllers like F5s. And back in those days, most of the organizations, they were looking into, or they talk about digital transformation. And in a simple term, the digital transformation was they were trying to move their applications, either adopting SaaS apps, or they were moving their data center applications into public clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP as infrastructure as service. Now, if you think about it, is that application kind of are getting distributed wherever, like going not in the data center, but really distributing. Same, then I started working for Citrix, where really that remote access use case was one of their kind of the key use case which Citrix addressed. What happened? The pandemic came. We always go to organizations and explain you need a kind of a remote access technology and all that as a Citrix. But organizations were not really, some of them are really not listening. But at pandemic, what happened was everybody was working from home. Can I show of hands in this room, how many of you go to office every day from 9 to 5?
If you're from AWS, keep your hand down.
Yeah. It's like 7, 8, 10 people in this room are just like which are going, but most of you in this room are kind of doing either a hybrid or are probably be remote. And now, again, what's happened is there is distributed users and distributed applications. The organization have a challenge how you can really secure basically between a user and application. What moves? The data. And the backbone of every organization is a data, and how they can make sure that first give a secure, a reliable access for those distributed users to these distributed applications and make sure that data is intact. And that's why organizations having kind of looking in towards it, but most likely, like as Jay, you work very closely with the analysts. Have you got some view on that how they or what they are talking about to address this challenge?
Yeah, so you would have all probably seen this SASE architecture before. So this really came about in 2019 and then was redone in 2021. For me, this is all about bringing networking and security together. So you'll see on the left-hand side is that network connectivity, SD-WAN, all of those functions, and then on the other side you have the SSE functionality. ZTNA is a part of that functionality. We're going to talk a little bit really around how we're seeing things, how we're seeing people progress. But Gartner have now coined a new term, and I'll ask for a raise of hands. Have you heard of the concept of universal ZTNA? Put your hand up. Okay. So when this first came out and I first looked at this, having worked with the analysts, I realized that it really only talks about the remote user or the hybrid user. It doesn't talk about when they're on-prem. It doesn't talk about how you secure them on-prem. It talks about relying on kind of the network when people come back on the network. What this concept of universal ZTNA does is it expands on SASE and basically creates a unified policy and a unified profile for users for access in granular ZTNA type. So what that means is when your users are remote, they'll come in via a particular platform. Today, when they come on-prem, they use a different platform. You secure them in a different way. They get a different policy. Universal ZTNA is doing it all from a single pane of glass. And I don't like saying single pane of glass, but from a single user interface, a single policy. So wherever the users are, wherever they're connecting from, whether it's headless, IoT, OT, whether they're agentless access, whether they're using an agent, whether they're on a corporate device or non-corporate device, there will be a single user interface for access, all based on zero trust. Okay, so Gartner either refer to it as universal ZTNA or zero trust everywhere. That's the next step, okay? But really, let's talk about the options we have today, the evolution of architectures. We'll all be familiar with hub and spoke or castle and moat, okay? This is very, very prevalent even today. I still speak to people, and I won't ask for a raise of hands on this one, but I still see about 85% of people are still sending all of their traffic back on-prem. Okay, and I'll give an example in a second, but this is that castle and moat, that hub and spoke. And this worked very, very well when our data was inside of our corporate environment. All of the data was there, our users was there, and they weren't moving. It doesn't work in today's world. But the other option is virtualized firewall. So, Jugraj.
Yeah, first of all, let's talk about a little bit on hub and spoke. And as he said, before you coming on, is it dark side you said? Or
dark side, yeah, sorry.
It's a bright side, actually. Okay. Yeah, before coming there, I'm sure you are probably most of your life was to managing those security products because you put those security, like I call them the stopgap solution. You have an issue on the security, you just put something there, you find something else. Then this is where you invested heavily into, and that's why the organizations, and even today we see some organizations still doing that. And really what is impacting is the user experience. As I said before, the applications are not behind your data center. What you are doing is you are hairpinning the traffic, and you're going to go through that in more detail. As I said, we are listening to our customers. We are also listening to the analysts like the Gartner and rest of them. And that's where as they are guiding us or they are guiding you guys also, we are trying to now moving away from that closed or a call it castle and moat architecture into more a distributed architecture. But what's happened is that the middle part is actually is a something, as again I'd call it as a not true ZTNA. What they did was they virtualized those firewalls which are in your data centers and put them into the cloud. Now instead of managing one, you are managing multiple of them, but you didn't really solve the problem. If that particular firewall which is on-prem gonna get compromised or have a vulnerability, that means you have to fix the others one also for that vulnerability. Now the cost and the management is really increasing, and that's where the SASE or SSC really come into the picture. Now, why not we put it as a cloud-delivered security service, send the user to that cloud-delivered security service, and from there they break out if they're connecting to web application, if they're connecting to SaaS application, or even if they're connecting to the private application, which is we are using VPNs today, and we're gonna talk about that ZTNA. But I'm gonna hand it over back, gonna send you to the dark side actually, and you will say it is a dark. If you go back, and this is your user experience, can you go through that for me, please?
So I will give some examples of how I've seen it, kind of this legacy VPN or this hub and spoke design doesn't work in the world we live in today. I have to be very careful because I've got a microphone, I'm being recorded, both voice and on video, so I will take out people's names. But you'll all be familiar with this. This is really backhauling onto the private network, into your data center through all of these on-prem services. It's really complex to manage. There are gaps between these services for people to hide, that attackers to hide and compromise you. You've got multiple vendors to manage. I certainly remember having to try and get downtime within the business to patch these systems. And they would be like, you need to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You need to go through a control process. And I'm like, but the door's open. There's a 0 day. I need to do it now. And so that's one example. Another example is a very good friend of mine works for a financial institution in the UK. And she works from home 4 days a week, and she's in the office 1 day a week. So she wakes up in the morning. When she's at home, she connects over her legacy VPN tool. I call them legacy VPNs. She traverses through the VPN concentrator that they have, and I won't mention the product. She goes through all of this on-prem services. They're up or down some of the time, but you go through all this complexity. She then jumps onto a VDI box to spend all of her life in Salesforce, back out where she started. Okay, so she's traversing all the way back onto the on-prem network using that bandwidth, through all this complexity, to jump onto a VDI box to go back to the cloud. Okay, I can see people smiling. Why are we still doing that? Why do we not let people just go direct to what they need to access? Another example is, during the pandemic, the company that she worked for did not have enough bandwidth or did not have enough VPN licenses. So she had to share her VPN credentials with a colleague. Let that sink in for a little bit. She would work in the morning, and she had to hand over the VPN credentials to her colleague in the afternoon. She works in a highly regulated environment where she had to get reports out within a 24-hour period. She would spend most of the time negotiating with her colleague, can I have some extra time because I need to get my report out? Every day, I'd hear her on the phone saying, oh, can I have another hour? Can I have another hour? Okay? And she was just using Salesforce, as was her colleague, where you don't even really need a VPN. Okay, that makes no sense to me. One other example is a personal example of mine. They use a video conferencing tool, and I won't mention the name, but we used to use a video conferencing tool in my previous company, and it wouldn't work over VPN. We had a standard legacy VPN. We didn't have enough bandwidth or enough performance to use our video conferencing tool over that VPN. We had policies in place that also said you were not allowed to keep corporate documentation off of the network. It had to remain on the network and couldn't go on your laptop. Those two things don't work together. So what used to happen was people would have to wake up in the morning, connect their VPN, download the files and break policy to put them on their laptops, disconnect the VPN, do the video conference to update the files, because otherwise they couldn't do it over VPN. That's why they needed them locally. What they were then supposed to do was disconnect from the video conference, reconnect the VPN, and upload the files. Guess what they didn't do? It wasn't that. They would go and get a cup of coffee. We ended up with files all on all the laptop machines, spread everywhere, multiple different versions, all got out of sync. We would have laptops either get lost or they'd get stolen that had corporate files on. All of these things just because we were still doing this model. Okay? I won't ask anyone to raise their hands if you're using this model, because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But I personally don't think this is the way we should be doing it anymore.
This is one more thing I want to add here is, I'm sure most of you, or especially the networking admin or the security admins, you have to upgrade your firewalls or you have to patch them, because what's happening recently really to these VPN appliances or these firewall vendors, the bad actors know that this is the backbone, yeah, because most of the people are either hybrid or working from home. And if let's see, really you can find the vulnerabilities. They are finding the vulnerabilities. I don't want to name the vendors, but you would end up in upgrading or patching. Okay, from my experience, I was at this ADC vendor, the application delivery. Now what the challenge was, the vulnerabilities were there. They have to upgrade that, and part of the upgrade, the SSL ciphers get upgraded. They have applications behind that ADCs now, which are not supporting those SSL ciphers. Now this organization, and this is a finance organization, I don't want to name, they are in this kind of a catch-22 situation. Either they upgrade to patch that firewall, or their application was not accessing, or they leave it, the firewall as unpatched. Now these are the challenges for the organization. And when I say patching, they have, this is a big finance organization, they have, I think around 60 application delivery controller, and each physical appliance was running 2 or 3 virtual application delivery controllers. You're looking at 120, and as Jay said, from like as a managing a security leader, he need to employ somebody to do this. By the time they finish upgrading or patching, there's another vulnerability. Now the cycle was basically he's paying for somebody to go there on the weekends and upgrade and patch.
Most of the time you actually don't get to finish. You get halfway and a new one comes out and you start again.
Yeah.
Before I move on to the next slide, I have the luxury of doing quite a lot of these events, and one of the main things that comes up from doing these events is we all have too many tools. Whether it's a CISO or a CIO, we've got too many tools to manage. It's hard to manage them. You need that downtime, and really that's where the bad actors hide, is between those tools. So really simplicity is what this is all about. Okay, you can start to simplify and remove a lot of these tools. I'm not going to lie and say when you look at cache for cache, is ZTNA cost effective if it's just pure cache against VPN? It's not, it's more expensive. But that's because it encompasses a lot of these other tools as well. So you're not replacing a VPN concentrator for another VPN concentrator, or at least I hope you're not. You're replacing it with something that does remote access, but will also do all of these other things. So that's really where the use case and the business case comes in. That's where you can go to your board or senior management and explain that this is not only a better and more secure way of giving remote access based on granular access, but you can start to combine other tools and reduce this complexity, okay? So I've highlighted some of these, but we did a VPN risk report recently, and we also did an SSE adoption report, and I've taken some of those statistics and put them into here. So I gave you some actually real-world use case examples. We know the risks of VPN. We know that they're getting compromised. We know that those legacy tools are at risk. Okay, I won't mention any names, but I did happen to be at an IDC event recently in one of the Nordic countries, and a hacker got up on stage and he said, I'm going to scan the Copenhagen network, like internet, and I'm going to show you on the screen everything I can compromise. I was a little bit nervous, and he said, I'm going to blank out the name of the companies, but I'm going to show you how quickly I can do it. He downloaded a tool, ran it on his laptop, and it came back with over 1,000 open firewalls or VPN concentrators within 15 seconds. And he said, I can easily go and get another tool, and it would just hard attack those. Okay? So we know that. We know there is a risk. There's doors open. There's 0 days. We know they can be compromised. ZTNA doesn't work like that, and Jugaraj can explain a bit of that. But also you have the risk of, with a legacy VPN, generally what happens is everyone gets access to everything. They connect with their VPN. They are an extension of the network. They get an IP address on the network, and they become visible from every client on the network and every server on the network, which means you've got east-west movement, lateral movement, okay? And yes, you can put ACLs on your network. I've done that. Generally, you put an ACL on, you break stuff, and then you take it off, and you forget about it. Or you may think you've got it right, but you haven't quite got it right. So there's still that lateral movement. The whole reason people are adopting ZTNA is to move away from those risks. Then you've got the poor user experience. I gave you examples of that. I talked about video conferencing. I talked about it being slow. We all know that backhauling traffic and running it through and all that on-prem stuff and using what relatively nowadays is most people still have smaller speed internet connections into an office. Yes, you may have 500 meg. You may have a gig. Most people at home now have hundreds of meg. And if you've got 1,000 users or 2,000 users or even 100 users all sharing that connection, you're going to get a poor user experience. So why send people and backhaul them? Another example I've got is the management of VPNs. As I said, I worked for manufacturing companies. We were highly acquisitional. I was managing multiple VPNs at one time. In some cases, they were from the same vendor, but they had a different configuration. We actually had a matrix in my last company that would explain to users what VPN they needed to access which particular files or systems. The funny thing is it was on our intranet, and you needed a VPN to get to our intranet, right? So you have these risks, you have poor user experience, and you have complexity. And that's really what is driving this adoption of SASE. So we're starting to see more and more people understand what SASE is. They might not know what the business value is yet, but they know what it is, they've heard of it. But what is driving the adoption is this move towards SSE, the security element, and that's what's driving that is this ZTNA adoption. Okay? So SSE is made up of multiple elements, SWIG and CAS being other ones, which we'll talk more about in the session tomorrow. But primarily, people are moving away from VPNs. They start their journey with a ZTNA replacement, and then they start to consolidate other tools into that simplified platform. That's where you get that simplification, that consolidation, okay? I'll hand it to you to explain to people.
Thank you.
I will stand out the way. So
now, as HP Aruba, like really, as I said, we're listening to our customers, and we made this investment a year and a half ago. We acquired a company called Access Security. And in this investment, what we got out of that? And just want to highlight something very simple, that the platform we bought is called Atmos Cloud. Atmos stands for atmosphere. What this platform is, it built on Kubernetes, basically a containerized modular platform. And where we host this in public clouds. We use like any major public clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP. And what's the benefit of that? Like some vendors, some SSE vendors, they have their physical locations. The challenge for them is where they build their point of presence is the connectivity, the scalability, the resilience of that, because it's a physical, their own data centers. But for us, we don't have any of those challenges because we are leveraging public clouds. And they already, I don't need to explain the benefits of public cloud. They really provide you that we don't need to worry about the scalability. You can Today, you have like a 500 user. Tomorrow, you have 5,000 users. Does not matter. You don't need to come to us. You only need to tell us that these are the number of users I am now, and we can just ramp it up. Nothing going to happen. You don't need to get a box or anything like that. User experience is quite important. And there is a number over there, 500 edge locations. What that really means is that we are leveraging public cloud connectivity. They use these terms on RAMP, or some of them use terms like a front doors. Like Azure use a term called front doors. Google use Google gateways. AWS use AWS global accelerators. What they are is simply the pairing with them and the service providers, like a BT, you name it, all of these service providers, that a user, when using that service provider, his or her traffic is on that fast lane when connecting to that platform. And from there, SaaS provider also. They have better pairing. Either some of them are SaaS providers anyway, but some of them have that pairing with the SaaS provider as well. Now, if you think about it, when you are adopting our cloud or adopting our security cloud, your users having that best user experience when he or she is accessing those applications. Yeah. And we can get into more detail if you want to know more of this, what really we are running under the hood. You can come to on my demo. I can show it to you as well. But what we're going to talk about in this session is ZTNA. But there are key pillars of this platform. These are the 4 key pillars of this platform. But all of these 4s give us that SSC as a whole, as a platform. But today we're going to talk about, or in this session, is the ZTNA, or the Zero Trust Network Access. And really we got into those the details of why VPNs have those, the organizations want to move away, why. We already covered that in quite detail. But where really the ZTNA address those challenges. Let's first talk about Zero Trust. And I like to use a simple example of, let me build this slide and we can go through this. And I like to use a very simple example of Zero Trust is when you go through the airport security. Think about it, how many times you have to show your passport and your boarding pass.
Lots.
What they are doing is,
Lots and lots of times.
but what really you are not seeing, but you are in these guardrails. They keep asking you, can you show your passport? Can you show your boarding pass? And even if they go to a shop and you can buy something from there, they ask you, show me your boarding pass. And if you are not behaving right, they can still take you out of the plane as well. But what is really I'm trying to get to is that continuous authentication. They identified you, but they are continuously know who you are, what flight you're going to take. The reason they are doing is really they don't trust you. And that's a simple example of I like to use a Zero Trust. Try when you guys going back or flying back, see how many times, just count it. Easily like 3 or 4 times you have to show your boarding pass and you have to show your passport. Now again, going back onto the principles, identity verification. In VPN solutions, you have identified, do the authenticity first, and you are on the network. Basically, what you are doing is you are putting the user in the VPN scenario on the network. And now, as Jay said, especially the bad actors, what they do is they just sit there. They probably don't do anything. They do the reconnaissance. The example you gave, they sit there and they just look around what is happening, what's there in this network. And then after that, they create the weapon to really attack. And what happened in nowadays with this AI, that time of reconnaissance and weaponization is very short. Because they know that, okay, they straight away put it into the AI and say, this organization running these servers, operating systems, all that, is there a script available that I can go more deep or attack them or take the data away? And that's where that attack is surface or clearly is how we can reduce that. Least privilege access. With Zero Trust Network Access, again, we know who you are, what device you are using, and based on that, we're going to give you the access. And if you are deviating from that, if your device is deviating from that, then we're going to take the access away. As I said again, going back to my example, if you're not behaving right before flying, they can take you out of the aeroplane as well, because that's like really the behavior we are checking. Micro-segmentation. On your application side as well, we use a simple tagging. We know who this user is a corporate user, or it is a contractor, or is a third party, which application I'm going to give access to. And I would like, some of you probably be already seen this demo before, but keep your phones ready. I'm going to show you how easy you can give that access. And you are my third parties here, and I will give you access to some of those applications and show it to you that how easy we can give the access and how easy we can take that access away. Now again, continuous monitoring, as I said, we can keep evaluating. Dynamic policy enforcement, again, based on this is a real-time users, is a third party. If you change that, we can take the access away. But we do that continuous evaluation on that. And this is really simplifying that zero trust. What really in this principle is not that you have authenticated once, you're going to be on that network. We know who you are, we check the behavior, and based on that those guardrails going to go up or down.
I think what I'd like to add here is we can work with multiple different IDPs. So whether you want to use Ping, Okta, Entra ID, or we actually have our own built-in IDP to check the identity. And we actually posture check multiple different things and every minute. So we're constantly checking that person at the airport, their password. Okay, so if for any reason the firewall stops on a machine, or the disk becomes non-encrypted, or something runs it shouldn't run, or the user comes out of the domain, or they appear in a different area, we check every minute, and we will adapt the access. We can remove it, but we can also change it. And the reason for changing it is because maybe if you're coming from a corporate device, you get a specific level of access, and if you come from a non-corporate device, the postures won't match, you get a different level of access, okay?
And the last part of that is, especially in the zero trust, is the visibility. We know who you are. We know what application you are connecting to. In this scenario, I'm talking about VPN access. Say it's a secure web gateway, it's a SaaS application like CASB. We create those, we get the data rails or the data feeds, curated them, and created those dashboards that really help you to understand if you're looking for how effective this solution is, who's accessing this solution, where they are. And not only that, we can also have analytics to help you to address if there is a challenge, user experience. You see who the user is, what application is he's connecting to, and everything in the middle with those latency numbers. You straight away know that, okay, this is a user issue, or it is an application issue, or it is something to with the HP Aruba data centers, we need to call them. You can have a very good visibility on that one. Now,
I actually think that's a key one as well, because when people are coming in over a traditional VPN, you generally don't get visibility. Because as I've said, they're on the network, they get an IP address, they're an extension of your LAN. You generally don't know what they're accessing. I'm not saying in all cases, but generally you can't see what they're accessing. So not only can we show what people are accessing, we can control what they're accessing both proactively and reactively. So if for any reason you think something's been compromised, you can continue to look at what's going on, and all of the information is in a dashboard or can be exploited to a CMOS SOAR of your choice as well. Okay.
Now I'm going to just talk about that, how we simplify that architecture, or what this really under the hood we are doing. As you see here, the black dots we have at the bottom where your data center are, or your applications are, or if it's a infrastructure as services like in the cloud, AWS, Azure, where your application you are running, your private application I'm talking about here. We are putting those lightweight Linux connectors. These are simply the VMs. And what these VMs are, you can use your you can use the ESXi, you can download OVA for that, or you can use AMI. We have images also available in the marketplace. What these Linux machines are, what they are doing is they are connecting to our platform, and if you see, the connectivity is outbound now. Yes. And when you have a connectivity outbound, straight away, especially for the security folks, that you are now, that the risk that you have, you have reduced that attack surface. You have reduced those distributed dynamic DDoS kind of attacks because it's outbound connectivity now from your applications to our cloud. And on the left-hand side, that user which is trying to connect to those applications, and in this case, you will see also, I'll give you the access as well, but that user is now getting authenticated, connecting to our platform. We are doing the authentication authorization, and the policy enforcement point is that's the big black dot there. That's where we are doing the policy enforcement, and if that user is allowed to access to those applications, he or she have access to these applications. But only he or she can see that what we told or gave the access to that. It's not like as on VPNs, you put the users on the network. This is not a IP connectivity. This is not a layer 3 connectivity. What this connectivity is only the application level connectivity. Because we are sitting in the middle, we are stitching those two connections together. Connection from the apps and connection from the users. And as I said, I can show it to you as well. Now, we're going to go through the use cases. And this is an interesting use case, especially for you, Jay, because as dark side or?
Dark side or light side?
It was
we'll ask for a raise of hands.
Yeah, it was not really that this is the right side now you are on. But can you explain, especially for your time as in those manufacturing organizations you worked, how hard it is to give the access to third parties?
Well, so actually the main reason I'm stood here today is because of this use case. Okay, so coming from a manufacturing company, I had these black boxes we would install on the network so that we could give access to people to support those machines that didn't belong to us, okay? They were black boxes. We didn't know really what they did. They created some kind of VPN tunnel. We were supposed to keep that network completely separate. But over the years, more and more that network needed to have Active Directory access or file server access and all of those kind of things. And we had these black boxes doing unknown things. So I didn't want to put an agent on the third parties that were accessing those black boxes and give them traditional VPN access. And the reason I didn't want to do that is because I didn't trust the machine. I didn't know what was on the machine. I didn't know if it was virus checked. I didn't know if it was being patched. And I didn't want to give them access to my whole network. So I needed a tool that would give them access, SSH or RDP access, into my network without an agent. But it needed to be just to the particular thing they needed to access and nothing more. So that's one example. I also had a number of examples where people needed to get into our ERP system for support, or whether they needed to get into a printer system for support. And again, I didn't want to deploy a VPN client onto their machines. Many of our early adopter customers, Procter & Gamble, Farmers Insurance, all started with this specific use case. Procter & Gamble had over 60,000 third parties. What they were doing is shipping out machines to those third parties. So they were buying those third parties or contractors a corporate device, patching them, maintaining them, putting an agent on them, and shipping it. Anywhere between $10 and $15 million per year on devices. During the pandemic, they had a real big problem, supply chain. They couldn't get those laptops. They couldn't ship them. Or if they were shipping them, it would take a long time, and the contractor had resigned or had left, and they were never getting those machines back. So it was costing them significant money and a big delay in getting people online. So they moved to us for third-party and contractor access without an agent. So within hours, you can create the user, give them access, and they are working. You can control that access. You get visibility to what they're doing. We even see the commands people are running. And if anything changes within the environment, their access is removed. So they saved between $10 and $15 million every year and managed to get contractors online within days instead of within months. Okay? I think it's worth you showing it.
Yeah. Now, I just want to, as I said, I just want you to just experience that how easy. So you are my third parties, you are my contractors. And what I did is I just created a very simple rule for in this session is you can actually scan that QR code. Is QR code going to take you to this portal? But you will see I made it very, very simple, like how easy to give the access. And I will also show you the policy that what I have created. And you see there I have like around 3 or 4 applications I am publishing there. Actually, I have a bigger QR code if somebody is
And I know that there's irony in getting you to scan a QR code when we're talking about security. I understand the irony. It's just going to upload your bank details, and it pays for our beers tonight. So just please give it a go. Okay?
Yeah, if you could just show me hand if anyone have tried and you see that, you see any applications? Yeah. As you see here, yeah, this is that use case again. I was talking to a travel agency a few weeks ago. They have 7 VPN appliances they have to manage, or 7 VPN technologies. And the reason is that the acquisitions, and they said we have to adopt it, because how I can give them access to their applications. Having something like this is so much easy. First of all, you don't need to manage any of those VPNs. As I said, the technology itself is kind of, people want to decommission it. But having this is a very simple example when it comes to adoption. Now let me show it to you actually what really under the hood I'm doing here is, I have I think probably these are the 4 apps as third parties you are seeing, because I have some additional access. But this machine at the moment, it is very similar to what you guys are. This is a unmanaged machine here. It is not a managed machine. This is BYOD. And what I have there is I got a policy where I got, if you are a contractor, you only have access to the third-party applications. And if I want to take that access away, say I want to, there is an application which is, in this case, if I have, let me show it to you, those third-party application. There is a RDP server, there is a SSH server, there's a Splunk, with a few of them. And I say, okay, let me take that access of this jump server. I want to remove the access for these users. Only thing I need to come here and remove that tag for those third parties which I'm using in the policy. And on your, let me commit this, and what you're gonna see is now, in like few seconds, that application's gonna disappear for your access or those third parties. As you see, that application is disappear now. Even if a user connected to that, we're gonna take that session away. Say somebody connected already to that RDP server, or connected to SSH server, or even connected to that web app, we're gonna take that access away even at the session level. You can automate this as well. If you're running any, this is all I'm showing you is a configuration, but if you are having some kind of orchestration tool in your organization, we have APIs available. You can say you have another tool, SIEM or Source Solution, and you see with that, the behavior of a user changes. You do an API call to us, we can revoke the access for that user or for that application. This is how simple it is. Sorry, question.
So, why there was no behavior analytics that blocked 10 people to connect with the same user and password for
No, this is
demo.
a demo stuff. Yeah,
It's a demo.
Yeah, this is I kept it yeah, otherwise I have to create everybody. I need to probably meet you outside when you're coming in and taking your details and creating those users. This is for the demo purpose, to make it more simple, just to show you the power. But this is not a real world example. In the real world example, what you're gonna having is either you are using the IDP as Jay said, you have those users, you enroll those users using the IDP, and then create the policy on the users or on the groups. Yeah? But here, because this is a simple demo, that's why. Good question, actually. You got it. At least you got the access, yes? Now, what I'm going to show it to you is a second use case, which we're going to talk about, is now for especially the VPN appliances. They are for the corporate users, like especially for the remote access. And in this scenario, which is, say, the corporate managed machine, how you can really control the access. We are now moving from agentless BYOD more towards a corporate managed machine. And that's where we also give you an option of you can run an agent on your machine. And when you run an agent on that device, what we can do is we can do the device posture check. Yeah? We can identify, going back to the zero trust principle, we can see who this user is, what device it is this device a corporate managed machine, if this device is running an antivirus, is encrypted. We can do quite extensive checks on most of the enterprise operating systems, like in my case, it is Windows. If you're running Mac, if you're running iOS, if you're running Android, we can create those checks accordingly. And then based on that, you can have a simple policy. User is this, running this operating system, make sure he or she is running like a Windows 11, antivirus is enabled, go this particular process running, go this registry setting, and based on that, now we can make this machine a domain joint machine, or we can make this machine as a more kind of a corporate managed machine. But to show it to you, like I'm running, again, this is a demo, because I'm the admin, I can enable, disable the access of mine. What you're gonna see is here, because this machine gonna become a corporate managed machine, this machine gonna pass all of those device posture checks, and I now is a corporate user. See, I got additional access now because I am a corporate user.
So this is a true VPN replacement. So although you can see access in the portal, and you can use that if you wish to go in, you don't have to. Some people take these applications and put them in Okta, or put them in their IDP, or they put them on their intranet, whatever it might be. But you don't have to do that. It truly is a VPN replacement. So the users don't need to use this portal at all. You can still access applications in the same way as if you were on your legacy VPN, but you get access just to those applications. If you try to go to anything else, try to ping, try to do an NS lookup, try and traverse across the network, you don't get any of that access. You simply get access just to this. Like I said, you don't have to use the portal, okay?
And as I said, this is again that corporate, we want to make sure that the adoption, yes, you can start with agentless, you can start slowly, but as you see, when you manage to get the agent installed or push the agent with your MDM solution to those corporate devices, this machine can become a Active Directory joint corporate managed machine now. Yeah. And one more thing, I don't have it here, but I want to talk about this. This machine can also, with our solution, it's not you are doing it user or client to application or client to server traffic. We also offer a feature called server initiated flow, which is helps you to do the server to client as well. And server to client, if I give you a simple use case of is SCCM, for example, patch management, remote management of those devices, we address that use case as well in our solution. But I will leave that for tomorrow, because that's gonna be more a detailed demo in that one. Let me go back on to the last use case of today, because I want to make sure that we finish on time. And the last one is securing those cloud environments. We have talked about, as Jay said, we are backhauling the traffic, getting to, say, in his, the scenario he explained was like getting to the Salesforce or getting connected to the Salesforce or Office 365. The reason organizations are backhauling the traffic is, one is clearly because they have invested a lot of money into this security stack over the years, and all their feelings are attached to them. That's why they don't want to move to out of that. But the key there is another use case as well, especially the SaaS users. They have conditional access. They say to the organization, give me your IP addresses and we will whitelist them. That we see, okay, if you are HP user, you need to come from these IP addresses, and we give you the access to that application. If you are not coming from those IPs connecting to your SaaS instance, you're not gonna get that. We can address that. We give you the choice as well. We call it a feature of source IP anchoring. If you want that, we can help you also that you can steer the traffic via your data center. You can steer the traffic via those connectors when you're connecting to those SaaS application. Again, it depends upon the use cases, what you want to address, but here we can really now, one more thing addition to that, as I said, going back to the zero trust principle, you're not only connecting from the whitelisted IPs, but you are also doing all those device posture check on those machines as well. Now, you want to make sure, or you want to give that additional security check. This is a corporate managed machine running all of those antiviruses, for example, and also on top of that, going out to connect to this SaaS application with our IP addresses. Now you have that additional controls, and that's where we can help you to connect to those cloud environment securely as well. It's not really a demo, I can show it to you, but what the demo is that if I'm, say, going to in IP chicken or something, I can breaking out from my connectors. But if you want to see the demo, please come upstairs. I can go into more detail of that as well.
So I think we have about 10 minutes more before you can get a beer. Just wanted to talk briefly around what we're offering within our portfolio, what we're doing today, and where we're aiming to go, okay? So on the left-hand side, we have our SD-WAN offerings. That's the left-hand side of the architecture from SASE, okay? Connectivity, SD-WAN, WAN optimization. On the right-hand side, we have the SSE offering. Combining those two together creates this idea of unified SASE, okay? But when you talk wider than that, as I mentioned before, Gartner are coining this term called universal ZTNA. So being able to take SD-WAN and SSE and NAC and roll them up into one unified portfolio, and you can really see that no matter what the user's doing, where they're coming from, if they're on a corporate device, if they're not on a corporate device, if it's IoT, OT, whatever it might be, you get one single place to control policy and one level of visibility. So not only will we be able to start using our AI functionality to start notifying people around are things changing. For instance, as I mentioned, the person before, she logs in the morning, 4 days a week, she only ever accesses Salesforce. What happens if suddenly she starts to try and do something else? What happens if someone in your IT team suddenly tries to upload 2 terabytes of data? What happens if a machine appears somewhere it's never appeared before? You want to know that. You want to be proactively told about that. And you can do that via that one level of visibility. And also reactive. We all know at some point we will be compromised. If you haven't already, there's a good chance you will at some point. You want to be able to understand where you were compromised so that you can close the door really, really quickly, okay? I was working with a company about 6 months ago in the UK, and their VPN was compromised. We sat down and we had a conversation, and only a few weeks ago, they were compromised via the same VPN in the same way and paid the ransom again, okay? So we really don't want people doing that. We really want to move away from that. One of the questions that I get asked all the time, and it's a very valid question, is how do I move away from my VPN? And what people mean by that is today, many of you won't know who is accessing what on your VPN. And what, if you have multiple VPNs, which one they're using. Certainly in my experience coming from manufacturing, I had people that had been working in the company 10 years, 20 years, 25 years. They'd moved around within the business. They had access to multiple different systems. We didn't know what they were getting access to. We didn't know how they were accessing it. We just knew they were coming over this dark VPN tunnel. So your biggest risk is if you move away from that VPN and you have to define granular access, how do you define that granular access? Do you cause upset to your users by not giving them the access they need? We have a tool called Application Discovery. Basically what we can do is we can give access a bit like VPN, so you can give IP address access, subnet access, VLAN access. The users then will get the access they require. We then monitor over a period of time and we recommend policy. So we can say this group of users on a daily basis is accessing this group of applications. Using tagging, we then recommend policy and you can go more and more granular. We would prefer that you don't move everything in one go because the problem is if you go with that non-granular access, many people will kind of stay there, but we can help walk you through that process. We can help walk you through the policies you need to define. So what that means is on day one, you can move everyone off of your VPN, and then you get more and more towards that zero trust mentality, okay?
The one thing I want to highlight here is that as you know, we made this acquisition of Silver Peak, was SD-WAN, and then we have SSC. But how we can really bringing into this ecosystem of HP Aruba. We are working very closely, our engineering teams are working now, especially like SSC for SASE, we already integrated nicely in our SD-WAN solution. We have API integration of SSC and SD-WAN. On NAC side of things, we are now working on, or our engineering teams are working on how we can bring the intelligence of NAC, of ClearPass, and use that intelligence into the SSC or into the security cloud, say like the device IDs for IoT devices. And that's another good use case where we're gonna really address that as well. Now, not only the users, which I showed it to you that you are a contractor because we are integrating with IDP, but with the NAC, we're gonna also address that IoT use case as well, because we have already a solution there. And it's going to be a very simple API integration from the ClearPass. We're going to send it to Access, and now we have not only the users when we are creating the policy, we also have the device IDs. And you can address those use cases as well, like your camera is only connecting to update from, say, if it's a Canon or whatever, or it's a TV, it's only talking to Samsung to download only the Samsung note is basically going onto a website and doing some data exfiltration. We're gonna all those control. Just on little bit on the vision, we are bringing not on these the 4 pillars, we are also adding firewall as a service into it as well. You will hear that in probably be in a month or 2 time, that the pillar of firewall where we can really address those branches where you have some firewalls, you can actually replace those firewalls. We're gonna become your kind of internet. You're gonna send all port and protocol to us. We have a secure web gateway, we have CASB, we have ZTNA, and going forward is a firewall as a service will be available in this, where if somebody is connecting to a FTP server and trying to do, we can control that connectivity as well. We only have 4 minutes left. I just, as part of the visibility, because no demo will finish without showing you the visibility, we have as I said, very clear dashboards available for you as well, that you can go really to look into it, who the user is, where they are connecting it from. Like in this case, I'm in, okay, let's look at United Kingdom, because I live there. Spain, we have 2 users there. These are all, let's see who's disconnecting it from Netherlands. And this is where you can really drill down who's connecting it from where. And in this case, this is that Aruba test user is connecting. But you can get into quite detailed information here. As I said, the SaaS application, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But you can also see the private access, the applications. Not only that, the last part I want to highlight is we can, for troubleshooting point of view, if somebody is connecting in, let me move it to 6 hours or something, that this is where the user connecting it from, and those latency number, as you see, the source is connecting it to the point of presence in London, and from there the user is that the London point of presence, the connector is in a Vinci data center, and what the destination they are connecting it to. You can have a full visibility here. This looks quite clean. If there is something red, you straight away see this is red. We need to now identify where is that problem. We can get into quite detailed information there as well, especially to address those use cases. That's all we have today. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any
for your time.
questions? And if you're too shy or don't want to ask in front of everyone, you can either speak to us or come up to the booth. No? I have one question before we finish. Is it okay to put pineapple on pizza? Put your hand up. I'm glad nobody said, no. Put your hand back down. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks, guys.